And now it's time for a Gravitas exclusive. Will China invade Taiwan? Events of this past month have given us an answer to that question. China will not shy away from launching an invasion. It's a question of when, not if. What does that tell you about Xi Jinping? Well, here at WION, we've always maintained that India must take lessons from the situation around Taiwan because Xi Jinping's campaign of expansionism will not end with Taiwan. A successful invasion will only embolden him further. That's also the assessment of our guest today, former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd. He's among the few world leaders who have looked at Xi Jinping in the eye and dealt with him very closely. Kevin Rudd says once Xi Jinping gets Taiwan, he will double down. The Chinese president could well turn his attention towards smaller disputes, other disputes. And this includes the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. What would that mean for India? How do the Chinese assess India after what happened in Galwan? The answers might surprise you. Here's an excerpt from that exclusive conversation. Hello and welcome to WION's Global Leadership Series, where we interview current and former heads of state. Today with me is Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister of Australia and the Global President of the Asia Society. Mr. Rudd, welcome to WION.
Good to be on the program. Good to be back in Delhi.
Do you think the Chinese are going to invade immediately? Most assessments are that it'll take a few years, but the way things are building up.
No, I don't accept the logic that China plans let's call it an armed assault on Taiwan, whatever form that takes, until the late 20s and early 30s. And there's a reason for it. Militarily, the PLA still feel underprepared. Financially and economically, because China depends on the dollar-denominated SWIFT system, financial settlements worldwide, both for trade and investment and capital markets, that for those reasons, the imposition of Western sanctions would be devastating for the Chinese economy. So China will wish to strengthen itself, both militarily, financially, and economically in terms of a greater degree of self-reliance before it rolls the dice on Taiwan. So I'm much more concerned about late 20s, early 30s. That would still fall within Xi Jinping's political career, given that he wants to be seen in Chinese communist history as the man who completed Mao's revolution.
Do you see Nancy Pelosi's visit as a needless provocation or a move that had to be made to show solidarity for Taiwanese democracy?
Well, solidarity between the United States and Taiwan existed well prior to the Pelosi visit. The problem with the Pelosi visit is that it fools around with the symbols of the One China policy. And if you wanted to create an unnecessary, artificial and early tripwire for crisis escalation, conflict and war, then there's nothing like fooling around with the One China policy through highly symbolic acts to bring you closer to the precipice. And that's one of the reasons why I opposed the visit. Through no lack of affection for Taiwan, I studied there as a student. I know what it's like. I've got stacks of friends in Taiwan. I've seen it evolve over the years. But you've got to ask yourself two questions. Is Taiwan more secure or less secure as a result of the Pelosi visit? I would argue less secure, because the People's Republic of China have now normalized a new set of military drills and behaviors in and around the island, including trial blockades of maritime trade and air traffic, which in my mind have in fact brought Taiwan closer to the precipice than it was before.
It has been suggested here in India that if China were to invade Taiwan, it would serve as a message for Arunachal Pradesh. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, as you know, the history of China's claims in relation to what is now and should be sovereign Indian territory is a long and complex one. My overall judgment would be as follows. If Taiwan was successfully taken by China, knowing the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party would then feel emboldened across the other three frontiers that I referred to. And therefore, on the specific nature of what China would do in terms of all, as it were, the sub-elements of the very long disputed border, with India, I couldn't comment. But I think it would be fair to say that if Taiwan was suddenly under China's belt, so to speak, that the nature of Xi Jinping is to continue to press advantage. He doubles down.
How does the Chinese leadership view India?
There was an excellent book written recently by a former Indian Foreign Secretary, Shan, who I'm sure you know, on China's perceptions of India. He's a friend and colleague, and I've been reading the book. And it's an excellent account of long historical perceptions by China of India. I think the Chinese, in their heart of hearts and minds of minds, recognize India as an ancient and continuing civilization like their own. Of course, the entity we call India has been through multiple historical incarnations in that whole period. But so has China, frankly. You've had invasions by the Mongols, you've had invasions by the Manchurians, and as with India, you've had attempts at colonization by the West as well, including the British. And so ancient and continuing civilizations, problems of continuity in terms of, let's call it, external security threats, and problems from the West. I point to myself as some Australian criminal outpost of the British Empire. And so in terms of modern India, I think my conclusion, as I deal with Chinese think tanks quite a bit still, despite COVID, is that the Chinese system's quite respectful of Prime Minister Modi's India. They've seen him re-elected with a thumping majority. They've seen a redirection of Indian strategic policy, most acutely manifested in the Quad and it being elevated now to summit level. They've seen an Indian economy now growing quite robustly, notwithstanding COVID, at between 6 and 7% annually. And China's slowing for a range of reasons, largely self-induced. So for those reasons, I think what permanently puzzles the Chinese is how can 1.3 to 4 billion people be a robust democracy, given their only historical script in their mind is that it has to be autocratic. So for all these reasons, I think there is perhaps a grudging respect, but a high degree of respect, I think, for India under Prime Minister Modi. And I think they were surprised at a military level by the degree of pushback on the border in 2020. I think they were militarily surprised.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Certainly. It's been good to be with you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.